Here we are at the gates of the Ormeau Park on the Ormeau Road at the beginning of this year's wonderful wander. I'm Jim Deeds.
And I'm David Campton. And usually we'd be joined on these walks by 50 to 70 people exploring a small part of our city and sharing bits of poetry, anecdotes and history. This year we're going to be going from here at the gates of the Ormeau Park on the Ormeau Road across to Botanic Park and then up through there to the junction with Stranmillis Road and meandering down through the university area towards the city centre.
So just as you begin your wonderful wander, why don't you pause here at the gates of the park and take a look around. Just see what you see.
It's really lovely to see the parks being used more these days. That's been one of the upsides of lockdown. I mean, I was really bowled over a couple of weeks ago when I was here on a grey Sunday afternoon, and social distancing in this vast park was actually a problem, and that wasn't a problem before lockdown. I do hope that that's something that we don't lose when we eventually come out of lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, it's marvellous actually to look around and to see family and friends in the outdoors. You know, we can look at the terrible difficulties that we absolutely have been through during this year, and yet there's something heartsome and consoling in seeing that, and particularly here in this park. I mean, David, this park has got a great history, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it goes back before the beginnings of Belfast. I mean, its name, Ormeau. I mean, people of your and my vintage, we hear Ormeau and we immediately think of
bread.
The bread.
Yep.
It's the bread Ormeau, and the bakery was just up the road on the other side. But this park goes back long before it. Apparently the name comes from the French for elm. I'd love to say that was because of my knowledge of French, but it certainly wasn't. And I don't even know whether there are any elms in this park anymore after the blight of Dutch elm disease. But it was originally Ormeau Cottage, and then the Marquis of Donegal bought this as his retreat when he sold off his house down in Donegal Place at the beginning of the 19th century, the first of the rush to the suburbs, as it were, and he created this country park at that stage. But he was a bit of a gambler, the second Marquis of Donegal, and after he died, the family had a pile of debts to address, and eventually the city corporation bought this house off them and converted the park into the first public park for the expanding city of Belfast. 1871. It was opened. Apparently, its opening was marked by a grand parade from Carlisle Circus through Belfast, and attracted a huge crowd, finishing with speeches here in the park. There've been a few more parades of various kinds to this place over the years, but in recent years it's become more intimately associated with the Belfast Marathon.
It has indeed, and thank you for that great history of the park. I personally have a bit of a history with the Ormeau Park, and it's tied up in the whole idea of the Belfast City Marathon. Imagine, if you will, a fresh-faced young boy from West Belfast, 1989, first time really out of the West, I would imagine, in the marathon with a school team pushing a bed. Do you remember people did that? Maybe they still do that in marathons. The bed push. There were 6 of us hardy young men pushing a heavy young man in a bed in this part of the marathon. So we're coming down the Ravenhill Road on the other side of the park, and what we forgot to think about was that we were wearing our school tracksuit jerseys, and they had the name of our school, St Mary's School, but they had it written in Irish, Scoil na Mhóra. And as we ran down the road, there was a group of men who didn't seem to appreciate the fact that we had these Irish words written on our jersey, and they shouted something that I would dare not repeat in a Four Corners festival recording at all. Unfortunately, one of our number then retorted in a way that I would not repeat in a Four Corners. So they had a kind of sectarian to and fro. And lo and behold, we were not the only people able to run that day, because these men took a run at us. And I tell you, you've never seen a group of young lads push a bed as fast as straight into the Ormeau Park, trying our best to get lost in the windy paths of the Ormeau Park the whole way through. And I remember the day, as days are in Belfast, usually at these times, it was pouring with rain, and we were sodding and plodding along. But my goodness, we certainly hightailed it through the park that day. Oh my word. Well, David, listen, we're here. It's the Wonderful Wander 21, the Four Corners Festival. Let's you and I hightail it out of the Ormeau Park, will we?
Absolutely. And we're going to cross across here at the pedestrian crossing, and of course we're going to obey the rules of the road. And I hope that anyone who is listening to this on a podcast will also obey all of the social distancing rules, as well as not merrily wandering across the road and getting knocked down by the traffic. But we're going to cross the road here and going to go on to the Ormeau Bridge for our next stop.
Do you know, I've always found this corner of Belfast to be one really just full of life. I remember after my close shave in 1989 in the marathon, I actually a few years later came to work over this part of the town. I began to work in, I think it was 1993, on the Ravenhill Road in a children's home. I was a social worker for a long time, and I began to work there. And really coming back and forward from the west over to here, it's a real eye-opener, you know, because the Ormeau Road, certainly to my eyes at that stage, and even now, the Ormeau Road is so cosmopolitan. It's just a melting pot of all sorts of life, and actually it's really bohemian. You know, it's really artsy. It was just brilliant to come over, and out of, you know, at times the times over in the west it kind of felt really oppressive, you know. And coming over here, our theme this year in the festival is breathe, you know. And coming over here in those days, I really found I was able to breathe in a different way. So I've always felt really at home, even though I'm a wee Westie. I felt at home over in this corner of the city.
Well, ironically, here I am. In this part of the city. I was from the east, and it wasn't until very, very recently actually that I even ventured into Ormeau Park. So you know, this part of the city was one of those parts that I didn't really go into until the late 80s at the earliest.
Yeah. I remember discovering the Ormeau Park actually when I worked in the children's home I was talking about. We used to take the children down to play basketball, of all things, and that was the first time really I had spent any time in the park. And I just remember it as I do, and when I see it again today, it's just a beautiful big space, a beautiful space altogether.
Well, look, we're going to just take a stop here on the bridge, the Ormeau Bridge. It was built here in 1863 by Charles Lanyon, of whom we will hear more as the journey goes on. It replaced an earlier, apparently unstable structure. But it's been subsequently strengthened and broadened with concrete from Lanyon's time. Back in 2000, of course, this bridge became a focus for orange protests as the Balnafie Orange Lodge wanted to get down into the lower Ormeau Road. And in the other three corners of the city, the interfaces between nationalists and unionists tend to be marked by walls, but here, ironically, it's marked by a river. And there is a big question, you know, philosophically, as to whether we are going to build walls or going to build bridges. A question that's globally pertinent in the weeks after the inauguration of the new president in the US, given the iconic policy of his predecessor building that Mexican wall. This past week, there's been news about the planning approval for another bridge further downstream for pedestrians and bikes from Ormeau Park into the gasworks sites. On last year's Wonderful Wander, when we walked from the Titanic Quarter up to Stranmillis, we stopped at the proposed site and read the following poem by Emily Dickinson. Faith is the peerless bridge, supporting what we see unto the scene that we do not, too slender for the eye. It bears the soul as bold as it were rocked in steel, with arms of steel at either side. It joins behind the veil. To what could we presume the bridge would cease to be to our far vacillating feet? A first necessity. But let's move our vacillating feet to walk upriver along the Stranmillis Embankment towards Botanic Park.
Yeah, it's amazing to be doing the wander this way. We're almost cutting perpendicular through the way we went last year.
Yep.
It's amazing. But you know, if we were to even pause in the middle of the bridge here, and we were to look to the left and look to the right, I remember when I was young, to the left would have been very much identified with one community, and to the right very much identified with another community. And there has been a kind of a mix and a changing of those demographics that hasn't always been easy for the community here on either side of the bridge. And also, of course, we have people from all over the world now who live along this stretch of the road. But it strikes me as sad too. I mean, I can stand here and I can look down and I can see the bookies, Sean Graham's bookies.
Yeah.
And I can look up and I can see what was the spar. So now changed the spar there on the road where two men were shot dead, and the twisted stories and links between those two incidents. But so it's a road that has seen its fair share of pain and misery as well. We kind of, I suppose, those of us of an age who come through those terrible years and the troubles, I certainly find myself. I always carry that story somewhere.
Yeah.
Even on, like, I don't know for you folks who are doing the wander and listening to us what your weather is like, but our weather today is crisp, it's clear, it's sunny, it's actually quite beautiful. It's a wonderful day, but as we said in our festival a few years ago, Belfast is wonderful, but it is wounded and wonderful.
Yeah.
So I just want to honour those wounds that we see as we walk along as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. We will be coming back again to that increasing diversity of this city, and you know, as you pointed out, Jim, this road and this quarter, in many ways, is the very epitome of that within Belfast of a whole. But that in itself is not without problems. And here, as we turn on the Stranmillis Embankment, we'll have the Chinese Resource Centre on our right hand side, just at the corner, before we pass on towards the Holy Lands.
I remember just around the corner from the Chinese Welfare Association. Well, is it association? It is. There's the Asian supermarket. Oh man, I remember the first time I discovered that. A friend of mine, Big Fergal, God rest his soul, he's dead now. Friend of mine, but he was the guy who turned me on to it. He said, you have to go here. This is in the early 90s. And I remember going in, and the smell, it was just an absolute awakening for me. You know, these are smells I'd never smelled before. That wasn't champ. Oh man, how wonderful! And then there were little Chinese bakeries. I think they subsequently have closed now, where you could buy your dim sum and your little buns. Yep. Oh my word!
Although there are still some. I mean, all around here, the supermarket is behind there still, and then there are others around here, and it's wonderful to have a much more cosmopolitan experience around there. Here. But I mean, you genuinely mentioned there about being able to smell things. That's something that's deprived of you from in terms of a podcast. We haven't quite got that ability to transmit this. But you know, if you are actually doing the wander, we hope that you'll not just look around you, but you'll smell the surroundings. You'll breathe. Actually breathe. But I mean, in days gone by, coming along here, along this river, it wouldn't have been quite so fragrant. No. And indeed, I mean, I grew up in the east near the Conswater. I tell you, you got a lungful of that before you got near it. Jim, I remember the first time that we really met, and you read a poem that you'd written about a river on your side of the city that had a very similar fragrance about it. Do you want to read that?
Oh yeah,
that poem
I would love
stage?
to. I would absolutely love to, and it's an honour to read it. It's the first poem that I wrote for the Four Corners Festival. It was specifically for the festival, and while I wrote it about the river in the Falls Park in the west of the city, it evokes memories for David of the Consey over in the east. And I invite you now, as you pause here on the embankment, maybe take a look in at the river as it flows past you here down the embankment. Take in the sights, take in the sounds, and take in the smell of a Belfast river. I caught the smell of a Belfast river today as I walked past in a wet and windy wandering. The smell, not altogether pleasant, part muck, part rotten food, part metal shopping trolley, testament to the detritus of everyday life cast from the banks into the flow. The smell caught me unawares, caused me to stop. I was a young boy again, playing with sticks in this river. The weather was better, as it always is in memories. The heat from the sun warming the water, intensifying the smell, so it filled my young nostrils, till all was this river, the smell and the sticks. The smell stronger then, the river teeming, full of the things we didn't want to keep. We were not so environmentally green then, but we spent more time in the environment. Thumbs sore from catching hurling balls, not from Xbox fatigue. The smell. I was a young man now. I walked along the river's banks, the smell my companion, as I tried to find meaning in the killing and dying of my youth. The river flowed by me then into a divided city, barricades and bombs, bullets and bloodthirsty speeches of hate. The river saw it all, and so did I. The smell. I was a young father and husband in times of fledgling cessation and tentative talking. Hands nearly shook that had never contemplated such an act. My children grew playing by this river, smelling this very smell. The smell. It will remind me of my children laughing. I hope their laughter flowing now through our city, freely moving like the wise old smelly river. The smell. Still the smell, still the river, still the city, still us.
And as we move on along the embankment and turn our gaze from the river inland towards the Holy Lands, which given some of the coverage of it over the years would seem to be a bit of an unholy mess, a bit like its Middle Eastern namesake. I mean, we've tended to look in on this community as we tend to do with other communities. You know, we look in from the outside, and in terms of this community, we look into it over the years on St. Patrick's Day, or in recent months at the beginning of the university year, with all its lockdown transgressions, and there's a lot of tutting about the behaviour, and but it's really easy to be spectators or commentators. But you know what? Yeah, we have to ask ourselves, what's it like to live in the midst of it all?
Yeah.
As a resident, or as a student paying for a severely curtailed student life experience. I mean, literally thank God for the work of those within that community. The primary school and community groups at work, and churches with a strong community ethos in that area, like our friends in Fitzroy and City Church and others. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. It's a community of communities, isn't it, really? A community of communities. You think that there's the older settled community whose family maybe have grown up there through a couple of generations, you know, and you feel real empathy for them as they have seen the face of their place change completely. But then you have, I mean, the younger people and the students have absolutely responsibilities to live up to, like every one of the rest of us. But I know, being a father now of 2 university students, that their experience of university life this year is all but non-existent.
Denuded
yeah.
of all, you know, its richness.
Yeah. My younger of my 2 sons, Joe, took the brave step that he was going to move out from home in this his first year of university, and so he got himself and him and his friends went, and they went round and they found a place and they put their deposit down and they're renting a flat. But sure, he's had to move home, and he's paying for a flat, and not only for a flat, he's paying for an experience and life experience that he's simply not getting. So I think we do have to empathise, as well as holding our student friends to account, of course, like the rest of us, for how we all behave. But we need to be empathising with them as well, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As we're walking along here, I mean, one of the great things about the Wonderful Wanderer is not just seeing different parts of the city. It is sharing in different people's stories, different people's responses to the places that we visit, to the poetry that we share. Today, you're restricted to just listening to Jim and me rambling on, but I want this to be the beginning of a conversation, and indeed, you know, if you pick up this podcast, if you do this wonderful wander in your own time, we'd really love to hear your stories, your reflections, your poetry in response to all of this. We always say that the Four Corners Festival is only ever the beginning of a conversation, not the end of it.
Okay, so we're walking up the embankment, and folks, if you take a look to your right, we're going to stop when we come to the gates of the PEC. So when you see that big green metal gate, just see that, cross the road and go in through that gate. And David, will we step in?
We'll step
Let's
in.
go.
And here we are in the site of the PEC. In my time at Queen's, when I was studying for the ministry, this was the site of my Wednesday afternoon five-a-side football. After a ridiculously large lunch, coming down here to try and play five-a-side football. But many years before that, of course, this was the site of the Ulster 71 exhibition that marked 50 years of Northern Ireland. And actually, visiting here was my first ever visit into the south of the city from the east, 1971, and it's a vivid memory for me coming across here.
And did you come here as part? Was it as part of those celebrations? Yeah. And do you remember? Was there pageantry? What? Paint a picture for me.
There was all sorts of stalls and stands. I mean, I was only 6 years old, so I mean, it was. I mean, for me, it was huge and amazing, and I didn't understand any of the major political significance of it, and even the language that was being used and calling it Ulster 71, despite the fact that it was a marking of Northern Ireland, and you know, that whole confusion as regards Northern Ireland, Ulster. What do you call this place?
We're still knee deep in that.
Another 50 years on, we're no clearer.
I think we need to refer to it by about 7 different titles to please everybody.
I mean, they talk about that other city up in the northwest having multiple names. Yeah. The whole place. I mean, but that's been the case from before the existence of this state and the partition here. Actually, when I was going back through my father's affairs after his death, one of the things I came across was a leaflet from the Ulster 71, and on it was a poem that was reprinted from that had originally being written in 1912 as part of the whole Ulster Covenant thing, and then it was reprinted in 1921 with the foundation of the state and the partition of the island, and it was reprinted then for the Ulster 71 exhibition. And it was written by none other than the arch-imperialist Rudyard Kipling. I'm gonna read it because I mean, it's a complicated piece. It says.
Let's stop then, David. Why don't we stop right outside the PEC, the site of the 50th celebration and commemoration of the state. Just might I say that while David remembers being here in 71, I was born in 71, so I have no memory of that one. But the sad thing means that if Northern Ireland was 50 then and 100 now, that means I might be 50 this year. I hadn't realised. But folks, on your wonderful wander, why not pause here and look at the PEC. Maybe think yourself back into that time that David described, and let's hear that poem, David.
Ulster by Rudyard Kipling. The dark 11th hour draws on and sees us sold to every evil power we fought against of old. Rebellion, rapine, hate, oppression, wrong and greed are loose to rule our fate by England's act and deed. The faith in which we stand, the laws we made and guard, our honour, lives and land are given for reward to murder done by night, to treason taught by day, to folly, sloth and spite, and we are thrust away. The blood our fathers spilt, our love, our toils, our pains, are counted for us guilt, and only bind our chains before an empire's eyes. The traitor claims his price. What need for further lies? We are the sacrifice. We asked no more than leave to reap where we had sown, through good and ill to cleave to our own flag and throne. Now England shot and steel beneath that flag must show how loyal hearts should kneel to England's oldest foe. We know the war prepared on every peaceful home. We know the hells declared for such as serve not Rome. The terror, threats and dread in market, hearth and field. We know when all is said, we perish if we yield. Believe we dare not boast, believe we do not fear. We stand to pay the cost in all that men hold dear. What answer from the north? One law, one land, one throne. If England drive us forth, we shall not fall alone. Stirring stuff. But frankly, I mean, and I say this is a fellow from unimpeachable unionist stock, it's toxic stuff. And this year, as we mark, if not celebrate, the fact of the 100 years that Northern Ireland has existed, or partition has existed, or whatever way you want to put it, we need to find more positive, inclusive ways to do that. I mean, in recent weeks, Amanda Gorman at the presidential inauguration has epitomised how poetry can capture the mood and galvanise a nation. That's the sort of spirit that we need, not that type of stuff.
Absolutely.
From Kipling.
I was struck too, just from a Four Corners perspective. Within that beautiful rendition of her poem, she spoke of America being both wounded and wonderful.
Yeah,
you see that in there. I think obviously we influenced her.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean that's really interesting stuff. Again, from my own history, I just don't find myself in it. I had no idea there was a 50th celebration of Northern Ireland. The 100th has kind of snuck up on me. I don't know how I feel about it. But as I look here, we're walking now, folks. We're passing the PC on our left and moving towards Botanic, but even though what David has described was a very important event, there was an important event in my life as well in the PEC. It was the beginning and the end of my squash career. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon at about 2 o'clock. So I got into my...
I was out playing five-a-side, it may have been the same.
I remember I went in to play squash for the first time with a fella called Stuart, who was a friend of a friend, and we got changed. I was all very excited, and Stuart went to hit the ball, the first hit, and hit the ball and hit me squarely in the eye and nearly knocked me out, and I walked off the court, and that was it. that was the end of my squash career. So I tell you that, folks, as an aside, just as we walk in through now the back gates into Botanic Gardens.
Absolutely. I mean, these amazing gardens were originally established in 1828 by the Belfast Botanic and Horticultural Society. And they were only open to members of the peasantry in the city on Sundays prior to 1895. But then Belfast Corporation bought the garden and it became Belfast's sixth public park. I mean, an online review of the gardens have described them as a little paradise of peace. And that's what personally that's what they've been for me, particularly during lockdown, but even before that. But it reminds me that quote reminds me of a poem by William Henry Davies. It's often quoted by others. It's entitled Leisure, and we'll just stop as we head up the hill here under the trees and take a look around us as I read Leisure by William Henry Davies. What is this life if full of care we have no time to stand and stare? No time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep or cows. No time to see when woods we pass, where squirrels hide their nuts in grass. No time to see in broad daylight streams full of stars the skies at night. No time to turn at beauty's glance and catch her feet, how they can dance. No time to wait till her mouth can enrich that smile her eyes began. A poor life this, if full of care, we have no time to stand and stare.
Oh no, standing and staring around me and listening to that poem, I could just stay here all day. Botanic Gardens is indeed that little place of peace, isn't it? And I love now that this is I think one of my favourite sites in Botanic Gardens. We've walked up the hill from the back gate, and now on our left we can see the bandstand, in which I've never seen a band, I have to say, but I'm sure I am reliably informed there must have been one there at some stage.
No. I have seen a couple. I've seen a couple on a Sunday afternoon, occasionally in springtime, in less constricted times. You'll occasionally see a brass band on the bandstand, but yeah.
Yeah, I associate this part of Botanic Gardens with summer days and sitting on that bandstand with friends. I remember coming here as a young person with a whole gang of friends and seeing other whole gangs of friends coming and gathering, just as where we are.
And
you can see.
We're gonna head up to the right here, following the path. To the right of the park.
Now, what do we call now? We've turned to the right off the path, and on our left now there's this big space. Is this the green? What do we call it?
I presume it's called the green. I mean, that's all that I've ever called it.
Today there are two young people who would call it a football pitch.
Oh, absolutely.
There are a number of dog walkers who would call it a dog park. Yeah, so I'd say it has different uses at different times.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's an ice cream van up at the corner there, so there are people here even on this chilly day that we have are eating ice cream. What is it about Belfast people that we can eat ice cream at any temperature?
I cannot imagine why anyone would want to do that to themselves, even on this what is a beautiful sunny day today, but it's a balmy 2 degrees. But around the green, there are a number of perspex covered panels on the right-hand side, dotted around it, and they originally were created to mask off the tropical ravine over to the left when it was being refurbished a few years ago. But if you as you do the walk, you might want to stop listening to us blethering away and have a look at those panels, because on them are not just wonderful images but some amazing small stories about the park. And indeed, I've gleaned at least some of my knowledge of this park from them. But I have to say, when I read the stories on them, I wondered how many stories remain untold, because you can't capture them on a perspex panel.
There's so many people who have been here, so many Belfast people, so many people from way beyond Belfast have spent time in these gardens. They really are part of the heart of our city and our city experience.
Absolutely.
So we're continuing to walk around, and we're keeping the big green on our left as we do so.
Yep. Heading towards the Palm House, which is another Charles Lanyon creation.
There he is again.
Dr. Google told me that it's one of the oldest examples of curvilinear iron and glass structure. No, it wasn't. Clearly wasn't. But one of the oldest curvilinear iron and glass structures anywhere in the world.
Thank goodness, I didn't know that.
And it was completed. The two wings of it were completed in 1840, with the dome being put on later. And it's the earliest known work of Richard Turner at Dublin, ironworker, who went on then to create the Palm House at Kew Gardens. So this is an early experiment for him, and it's a beautiful place. And I literally fell in love with this place when I was living in South Belfast for a year between school and university. I was working as part of a youth team for the Methodist Church, and when living and working with the same people all the time got too much, I sometimes escaped into the gardens, and especially when it was wet, I escaped into the Palm House. And I doubt that it was Wendell Berry, when Wendell Berry was writing, he was talking about palm trees when he said, "I go among the trees and sit." But it does sum up my experience in this park and Palm House in the mid-80s, where he says, "I go among the trees and sit still. All my stirring becomes quiet. Around me like circles on water. My tasks lie in their places where I left them, asleep like cattle. Then what I'm afraid of comes. I live for a while in its sight. What I fear in it leaves it, and the fear of it leaves me. It sings, and I hear its song.
Beautiful. It sings and I hear its song. Do you know, I'm standing here now with David, and we're just outside the Palm House. So just pause if that's where you are. Find yourself there and have a look at it. I must have seen this building, 10,000 times in my life, in and out of this park, as I worked in various parts of the city and often found myself coming through here. But today I'm just allowing myself to let it sing and for me to hear its song. It is really a beautiful piece of architecture. It's sad now we see the closed due to COVID-19 pandemic. There's a restriction in our access to it, but even from here on the outside, it's a beautiful, beautiful shape. You might pause. We've walked a little bit together now. You might pause and just allow yourself a little break as David and I have a sip of our coffee and look around us, seeing pigeons and people interacting and harmoniously together. It's beautiful.
Mind you, if I can bring us down to a Belfast bump.
Please do.
There's two wonderful topiary figures outside the greenhouse, and I suppose they're supposed to be gardeners, but if you look at them from the wrong angle, they look like they're either golfers or playing a flute.
I don't know what this says about me, but they both look like they have their mitts up ready to box.
I mean,
they're ready to go.
It just goes to show.
In my head now, I'm whistling the sash. See what you've done? You see what you've done to me, David Campton? Oh my word! Beautiful.
But it does. It goes to show that you can look at the same thing from different angles with different things in our heads and our histories, and we see them differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Answer is not different. It's great. It's not different. Where would we be? Okay, let's set off. Will we set off again?
Absolutely. We're going to head up towards the gate. Where there's the junction between Stranmillis Road and University Road and the Malone Road, and up on the left-hand side is the Ulster Museum. We don't have any visual art element to our festival this year, and it's an omission that we will seek to address next year. But if you're feeling the lack, you can follow up the Royal Ulster Academy exhibition in the Ulster Museum, which is available to view online.
The sight of the museum still gives me a wee flutter in my tummy. You know, and it's an echo as well. It's a flutter of my own experience, but it's an echo of my children's experience. I remember bringing my children, who are all adults now, but when they were wee, bringing them in here and just hearing the delight in their voice as they saw this big grey building that from the outside underwhelms me in ways, and yet I know what is inside and the treasures it holds. Oh my word.
What was the bit that attracted you or your children to the museum? What was the?
Well, it's almost it's a Belfast rite of passage. You just go, and that's just it. But you know, the thing that for my children that got us was the wolfhound. The big wolfhound. We are a dog family. We have dogs, and we have big dogs. But the big Irish wolfhound was the one. But now for me, when I was a child, it was the mummy. The mummy.
Yep, the mummy. Yeah, definitely the mummy. But the first visit I made here was with school to visit the Girona exhibition, and that Spanish gold that was brought up here. It's an amazing museum. It really is. It's another joy, and I look forward to it being reopened again, to be able to get in. But we're heading up here to the corner of the park. Although we, as I said, we don't have any art exhibition. There is the exhibition inside the museum. But as we come up to the corner of the park, there is a piece of modern art. The rubber tree that is sitting in among other actual real trees, and this rubber tree created by recycled material from the various recycling centres around the city, made up of car tyres and rubber boots, reminding us of the importance of recycling in the face of the abuse that we give to this creation of art. Because, I mean, one of the things about parks is, and these trees around us, it reminds us just of the importance of the world around us, the natural world. The very fact that the trees are what provide us with the oxygen that we breathe, the very oxygen that we breathe, and you know, it's so important. Jim, you have a poem, Oxygen, do you not?
I do. I'd love to share it. It's quite a striking sight. This rubber tree, as it stands, shaming us, I guess, in front of these beautiful, tall, straight trees. So I wrote this poem called Oxygen, not specifically about trees. I wrote it as part of a group of poems that I call my love letter to the city. And so I wrote it to Belfast City, but also to those special people that we meet in the city. And I'll read the words to you, and I invite you, just as I do, just to look in amongst the trees and see where you go with this. This poem is called Oxygen. Just as my body withers and dies when starved of oxygen, so too my soul would do without you. My lungs ache for air, my soul for consolation, my eyes for just a glimpse of you. Each breath inhaled deeply, slowly, taking in the wonder of you, never growing old. As I grow old, though, these breaths grow more precious, blooming, becoming. I watch the glory of you, and as I draw my last breath and sight, I will breathe in thanksgiving for having known you at all.
Thanks, Jim. But you know, here we are, as you say, among the trees, and just want to, as well as this rubber tree here, it's sitting beside this statue of Lord Kelvin. That literally towering scientific figure who was born here in the city in 1824. And one of the facts that I gleaned off those panels earlier on was that the three giant redwoods here that surround his statue, they were the redwood was only scientifically identified on the year that he was born. Apparently, according to those panels. I have tried to check it on Dr. Google, but I can't find any clear evidence about that. But
that's a Belfast truth.
No, it's a
Belfast
true.
truth.
It's true.
That's just it.
But one final point before we leave the park and leave these trees behind us. It's When I Am Among the Trees by Mary Oliver. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness, I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, stay a while. The light flows from their branches and they call again. It's simple, they say. And you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light and to shine.
Wow, Mary Oliver.
Mary Oliver.
Did we lost Mary Oliver this year past? Is
Uh-huh.
that right?
Yeah.
My goodness, what an absolute beautiful poet. Oh, she really is. So, let's go.
Yeah, we're leaving the park behind us.
We've turned right as we come out of the gates of Botanic Gardens, and we're walking right down, what is this, University Road?
This University Road, yeah, and it's characterised by the university. It's all around us, and the new Students' Union going up over towards the left beyond the Elmwood Hall, which for most of us will remember as a concert venue.
That's true,
I think I'm trying to remember who I saw. I did see Thin Lizzy in the Whitla Hall, and I can't remember. I've seen a couple of bands, but
Bert Jansch. I saw Bert Jansch in there, a bit of traditional, classic, hippie, acoustic guitar, beautiful stuff. Now, but if you pause here, if you just pause looking across at the hall, and if you look at slightly to the left, that you'll see the Ulster Bank on University Road there, which was, of course, the Queen's Bookstore before it was. Do you remember? It was a fantastic bookstore, and it's it's very sad. I felt very sad when it closed. I spent many a day in there when I was a failing Queen's student. Less said, the better. But I spent many a day in there just going through the books. When it closed, I was kind of sad. I was no happier when a bank grew up in its place. But
no, it's.
But David, isn't it amazing to look across now? We're just going past Elmwood Hall to look across and to see what would have been forever the Students' Union. And now at this moment in time, maybe when you're wondering it might be built, who knows? But today it's just red iron girders.
And I'll come back again. I mean, when I see girders like that going up, I think of my dad, and I'll come back to that later on in the wonder. But I think of those as the skeleton of the city, because everything else goes up around them. But across the way, of course, is the historic centre of Queens, another Lanyon building. In fact, the Lanyon building, as far as Queens is concerned. This one erected in 1845 in the red brick Tudor style. And I mean, in the 19th century, much of Belfast was being constructed of red brick, but I don't think that this building was built to identify with the rest of Belfast. In fact, in its style, it was being built to identify with the dreaming towers of Oxford, and particularly the 15th century Founders Tower of Magdalen or Magdalen. I'm never quite sure which one it is in Oxford. It's one or the other, never having gone to either establishment. But it was put up to identify with that. One of originally a range of Queen's colleges set up across what was then the whole of Ireland by Queen Victoria during her reign. But actually, my memory of this actually is primarily around 2000, when in a fit of insanity, I agreed to work with some of the staff here in Queens to develop a set of mystery plays around the building called Testaments.
Wow.
I'd only just moved back up to Belfast again, and I was writing and directing part of that cycle with other members of staff. And the central tower, eventually it finished with the audience in the quadrangle behind the building, and them looking up at this central tower, and that was where the ascended Christ delivered his final speech for it. I think actually there's still a DVD of it out there somewhere, but I haven't.
Friends who are listening and wondering, I invite you to pause now and just have a look at this wonderful building, the Queen's University. Just look at this wonderful building, and maybe this would be a a moment to pause and really think about the theme of our festival for a moment or two. The theme of the festival 21 is breathe. So I invite you just to take a breath. Just take a deep breath. It's lovely David gave us there at the end of that, telling us the story of the plays that he developed. He talked about seeing the ascended Christ there on the tower. So I invite you just to take a breath. Unify yourself then with the risen Christ. Understand that as you breathe, the breath of God breathes in you and those around you. And you might even take a moment to look around and just pray for the place that you're in, the people that you see. Pray for the city. Pray for those other people who are wonderfully wandering today, whether they're part of a guided tour or just wandering through their lives. Hold each person you see in compassion and allow that compassion to spill over into how you hold yourself, for that is surely how God holds you today. Deep breath. Okay, friends, let's wander.
We continue on down University Road. We're coming up towards University Square and along the street here. And actually, my first sort of interaction with this particular part of the city was due to an institution on this street, the QFT, the Soul Theatre, and when a friend who was a few years older than me dragged me along here to watch a 6-hour Japanese epic in the QFT. That was my introduction to Japanese cinema. I haven't watched too much Japanese cinema since then.
To be fair, I think you might have watched it all. Yeah,
but at the far end of University Square, of course, is Union Theological College, the Presbyterian college, which was it's another Lanyon building and a different style again, but it was set up in 1853 to remove the trainee Presbyterian ministers from the liberal establishment that was RBAI down in the centre of the city and train them within the college there. It was then Presbyterian College, I think, at that stage, but it only later became a college within what was the Institute of Theology at Queen's. And when I trained here at Queen's as part of Edgehill College, Edgehill and Union worked closely together. And whilst our theological perspectives may have differed, I have to say I'm really glad of the relationships that I forged there, and saddened, frankly, I'll be honest, that there's no longer a relationship between Union and Edgehill, or indeed any of the Queen's affiliated colleges at an undergraduate level. I think that's not good for theological formation here in this city. But of course, that was also fact. Fun fact or not, it was the site of the Northern Ireland Parliament. It first sat there from 1921 to 1935.
So that's something I'm sure that will be explored throughout this year, this centenary, and brings up real questions for us and interesting conversations about the role of church and state in the formation of Northern Ireland.
Absolutely.
So we walk on then from the corner of University Square, we'll walk down cityward, down University Road.
Yeah. And one of the things that I always noted around this very short stretch here was the number of different church spires of different sizes and styles, and sadly now there's really only two of them have a worshipping congregation in them. They're ahead of us on the right hand side. we have the Crescent Church, and the right at the bottom on the left, the shortest of the spires is the Moravian Church.
Yeah.
Before that, there's the slightly Italianate-looking spire of what used to be University Road Methodist. But its congregation has long since merged with the congregation in Lisburn Road and is now part of the Belfast South congregation there, which is actually part of the circuit that I've got responsibility for as superintendent. But one of the things, it was sold off. The changing demographics of the city meant that that congregation got smaller and smaller, as many of the congregations in this part of the city have, and sadly it's an old and difficult to maintain building. It just didn't become, it was no longer cost effective, and particularly that tower. I dread to think how much it was going to cost to repair that. But it became, it was then sold off, but it got sucked up into the whole NAMA thing with the collapse, and was more recently bought over by Witherspoons to become a pub. But even they don't have the money to repair it, so that's now fallen through as well.
Yeah, the change in face of this part of Belfast. But I invite you, friends, if you can, to stop on the road here, just at the corner of Claremont Street. You'll see Claremont Street there on your left. And it just strikes me as you look down Claremont Street, there's a great sight. You can see right up onto Divis Mountain. You see right up on the Divis Mountain, and David, if you come and look with me, and you'll see the orange of the tower block, the city tower block, and beyond that on the mountain you see there's a white house, and that's the Quaker Cottage. And 2 years ago on our wonderful wander, we walked past the Quaker Cottage along a path there. So these years our wonderful wander really has made a circle right round all the corners of our city. But maybe we could stop again and take a deep breath and hold the people in hospital in prayer. Just really aware that as David and I walk on this day, we're just entering into the peak of hospital admission during this COVID pandemic. We just want to hold all those people who are ill in our prayers, hold their families, hold those people who are caring so bravely for them in our prayers. Just as we look now down Claremont Street and see that tower block, we just think of all the hospitals across the city and across Ireland and across the world. We are united in grief across the world. And for those of us today who are lucky enough to be able to take a breath, let's give thanks for that breath. And when you're ready, we'll walk on down. We'll be down University Road. So this part of the city has really changed over this last 10, 15 years, as you were saying, David, in terms of the churches. We also, in terms of the businesses along here, the last certainly 10 to 15 years, restaurants and have come and gone, pubs have come and gone. It's a very much a changing part of our city.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it will continue to change over the coming years. Of course, with the proposed transport hub that will be at the bottom of Sandy Row, which we're coming up to the top of Sandy Row. When that hub's there, that will change the dynamic in this whole area again. So it's it remains to be seen what happens there. In front of the Crescent Church here, this is probably the safest place to cross the road to the other side, because we're going to go across to one of the smallest parks in Belfast. We've been in two of the larger parks early on in the walk. But under the shadow of the Moravian Church that I mentioned earlier, there's a small park that's hugely overlooked. It's King William Park.
Is this Moravian Church, is our friend the Reverend Jared?
No. It's Reverend Livingston Towson is the minister here. Now, Livingston is taking part in the festival this week as well.
It's quite a beautiful building that he is pastoring in. Yeah, there he is, the Reverend Dr. Livingston Thompson. We see on the sign, if you want to pause and have a look at the sign, the lovely blue sign outside the church. It's a very impressive looking building. And this was serving Belfast since 1887. My goodness. I have to say that the Moravian Church has been one of the churches that I knew least about.
All right.
Least, and it's only really because I am blessed to be part of the Four Corners Festival and that I met the wonderful Jared along the way, that I would have known anything at all about it.
Well, of course, as regards the Methodist Church, of which I'm a minister, we owe we owe an enormous amount to the Moravian tradition, because it was the Moravians who deeply influenced John Wesley in his spiritual formation.
There you go.
And frankly, he stole a number of really good ideas from them as well. Wesley was an amazing spiritual magpie, and particularly from the Moravians, both in terms of their focus on prayer and small groups, the covenant service, the hymn singing. All of that was a strong Moravian tradition. But here we've now entered into King William Park under the shadow of the Moravian Church, and it's a teeny tiny little park, barely one little patch of green. There's the idea of pocket parks are now in vogue across the world. This is one of the original pocket parks. But in this pocket park, I mean, not only is there embedded yet another Belfast story. You know, the myth is that King William, on his way from Carrick and Belfast Castle up the Sandy Row, he stopped here to water his horse.
How'd you do?
No, there wasn't a park here at that stage, of course. But again, I wouldn't.
It's a Belfast truth. It's
another Belfast
We're just
truth.
going to hold it.
But also here is another piece of Belfast public art that people should stop and take a good look at. I get annoyed at times in museums about when museums exhibitions aren't well curated. And I have to say that one of my criticisms of Belfast is that our public art isn't often well curated. We don't tell the story well enough about some of the amazing pieces of public art that we have around here. And this is one of them. The Belfast Wheel. It was created by the Community Arts Initiative under the inimitable Carol Kane. And various community groups across the city created their little pizza segment of the wheel, and it's all. Maybe you want to stop and spot where you have come from in the city and the places that are important to you in this city, and stop and reflect and pray.
Amazing, and it's lovely as we look around this wheel, cast I imagine in bronze. It looks to me something similar, but we have our BT numbers, BT12, BT13, BT7. It's lovely. You could nearly find your postcode or certainly your area. I'm drawn to see some of the places where we have walked ourselves. We can find there the City Hospital just around the corner from us. Ballyowen up near my own place up in the west. There's the Donegal Road. It's a very tactile piece of art too, isn't it? It's beautiful. It's so wonderful.
It's super.
Falls Road, Donegal Road, Down, then right across over into the east of the city as well. My goodness. Yeah,
so one of the things I'd love to hear, I mean, it was said earlier on about wanting to hear stories. I'd love to hear some of the stories behind this sculpture. If anyone doing the walk has any of the stories behind the creation of it, it would be really superb to hear it, because I've looked, I can't find them. So be great to hear some of them.
And if we stand with our back to the wheel here and look down, we can look cityward. We look into Sandy Row itself. We see Malone Place, and just from a personal perspective, David, I'm looking across to where I was born. I was born in Malone Place Hospital, just there in Sandy Row. It's lovely. My father tells the story of because it was October '71, and there was trouble, and there were hijackings and cars being burnt here and there. That he and my uncle Paddy had to cross barricades and dip in and out of streets to get in to visit my mum, and then couldn't stay very long and had to come out and go through the same sort of thing. Thank God, as we take our wonderful wander today, things have changed. No longer do we have to go through burning barricades to get where we're going.
Yeah. But as we stand with our back to the Belfast Wheel, I just want to share a poem. It's by Paul McCann, who was born in Belfast, but has lived in Australia for over 30 years. It's I'm told it's a tanka, which follows a Japanese structure similar to...
That was a wee lorry that I had. Oh no, it's a Tonka toy, sorry.
No, it's a Japanese structure similar to an extended haiku, I'm told. This is called The Wheel of Life. Sometimes I get caned. Love is like a bamboo stick. Sometimes I get pain. Sometimes in life I get sick. Sometimes in life I'm healed. Life is, after all, a series of things to feel. I don't mind at all. In life, things turn like a wheel.
How fantastic is that? Did you feel the rhythm in that poem? Wow, and the poem turned like a wheel itself. Beautiful stuff, Paul.
Yeah.
Will we wander, friends?
Well,
let's wander.
Yeah.
So where are we going now? So we're in King William Park. David, how do we get out? Which way do we go?
We're going to go back out onto University Road and head down through Bradbury Place.
So turn left and head cityward.
Yep.
Let's go.
Yep. Oh, creaky gate.
The strength of David Campton there in evidence. Here, just like David, just ahead of us, which is now a familiar sight in Belfast, but it wouldn't have been just a few short years ago. The Belfast bikes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And actually, at the moment, they're currently rejigging the whole the fleet of bikes, and they're offering, I think, 100 bikes to community groups across the city.
Wow.
To refurbish and pass on. If there's any of them left there and you're part of a community group, get in there with the Belfast City Council. We're going to cross over the road at the bottom of the Lisburn Road, waiting for the Green Man, of course, and on into Bradbury Place. And of course, I mean, I used this used to be one of those places where the students came down for food at all hours of day or night. The sad thing is, I mean, look around at the moment, and there are so many empty shops, empty restaurants, and you do hope that life will get breathed back into areas like this in years. It's.
This was, of course, known as part of the Golden Mile.
Absolutely.
And my goodness, the shine has worn off the gold in a way. I mean, I kind of feel a bit sad as I walk down and I see the buildings boarded up. Yeah. This is where I spent my university years, rather than in class, I have to say, which is why my university career, like my squash career, was cut short. But it was so different then. I know we're in times of pandemic, but even beyond that, there's just a sense that this part of our city is maybe in need of a bit of love and care and attention.
And to be fair, I do know that there are conversations going on behind the scenes about how do they do that? How do we coordinate that? Because the difficulty with our city is that it does get broken up into quarters, and for a long time this part has fallen between the cracks, and it's a bit unloved and consequently unlovely. So we're going to cross the traffic lights here at the bottom of Bradbury Place before we get to Shaftesbury Square, and just turn round the corner into the bottom of Botanic Avenue. But as we look across the road, look up. One of the things I often say in in Belfast is look up beyond the shop fronts, and there's some amazing architecture. Across the road, there's a place with crenellations like a castle wall and a Tudor.
So it's like a Tudor cottage on top of the centre. Where would you get it?
Absolutely bizarre. You know,
it's quite beautiful. I remember I worked around here when I was a younger man in Botanic Avenue itself, and I worked on the third floor of a building and was able to look at all the tops of the buildings tell a whole different story than the bottom half of them. Absolutely. So we're here, we're waiting on the lights to change. We're just it's a great place. This is a meeting of different roads. Donegal Road, Bradbury Place, on round the Botanic Avenue, and we're crossing the road from the Donegal Road side over towards the Botanic Avenue side. We're walking past a very important entryway here. Now, if we look up and we see the yellow door, this is where our technical genius and mastermind, Alan Mabin, who is making sure the festival happens digitally this year, this is where he's based. We owe Alan a huge amount of money and a huge amount of gratitude for all the work that he does. So thank you, Alan.
And it is lovely to see things like the Accidental Theatre and spaces like that growing up in the city, because it does. It does speak of that culture, those little cultural seeds that will hopefully breathe new life into the city. But I want to stop just as we turn round the corner here at the junction of Botanic Avenue and Shaftesbury Square and Donegal Pass, because not only is this a road junction, but it's a cultural community junction here as well. And for a long while, this was the place, this was the area that you came in Belfast for the best quality Chinese food. You talked about but nowadays you have the Turkish market, you have the Nepalese restaurant up here, you have a number of Chinese restaurants. You look down the Donegal Pass and there's all kinds of restaurants. But sadly, you also look to the far end and you think of the Belfast Multicultural Association and the fire that there was there a couple of weeks ago, and that, as was said earlier on, that increasing diversity has brought tensions as well. It's not sadly it's that diversity is not welcomed by everyone, and people feel squeezed out by it. And it's we need to find a way of embracing everyone. And one of the things that I love is that in the middle of all of this diversity, at the bottom here is the Kingan Church, which was the mission of the Presbyterian Church to the deaf community. And we when we talk about communities here, we talk about Catholic and Protestant often. Increasingly, we've talked about communities coming from other parts of the world. There's also the deaf community, and we sometimes forget about that community. But we forget about the word unity within community. That there needs to be something much more embracing there.
There's a beautiful phrase that I heard. It was at one of a huge congress that happened in Ireland some years ago within the Catholic sphere, where we talked about the church as a communion of communities. And in a sense, like Belfast is a communion of communities, and we cannot be in communion with each other if we don't remember the deaf community, if we don't embrace people coming to our place from all over the world, when in effect we have gone all over the world and expected to be welcomed where we went. We have to turn that on ourselves as well.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to. At this junction, just like to share a piece that I wrote the weekend of the fire that reflects that need for a more embracing sense of what community means. I called it Just Us. There's no them. There's just us. We're all one in this community. We're with one another, not again. Even when we differ, whether we are white, is anybody white? Or black, same question. Or iridescent purple, red, white and blue, or green, white and orange. Male, female, cis or trans, gay or glum, straight or wobbly, young or old or in between, tall or short or wide, left-handed or right, left, right or centrist, leave or remain, innie or outie, inner city or culture, introvert or extrovert, or weird mixture of the two. Theist, deist or atheist, religious skeptic or secular fundamentalist, spiritual or materialist, sneerer or enthusiast, gracious and gentle, obnoxiously rude, grammar school girl or secondary school boy, Bachelor of Science, Master of Arts, Doctor of Philosophy or Medicine or Law, or graduate of the University of Life. Whatever letters follow our names or our inner names, English or Irish speaker, Ulster Scots or Ulster Urdu, born here, brought here, chose to come here, couldn't escape here, dog lover, cat person, pigeon fancier or not, fit as a fiddle, a physical wreck, tech wizard or Luddite, vegan or carnivore, wine bibber or teetotal, coffee or tea, milk and sugar or lactose free, football or rugby, whatever our team, there's just us. We can't exclude another, but we can isolate ourselves. Please don't. We want you to.
Love it. Love it, David. Excellent. Excellent stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's the right place to be saying something like that. We are really in the heart of that. And just to point out, if we're standing, we're just about to cross the road from the post office side. Is it still a post office? It's now an Istanbul market, from the Istanbul market across the way. But if you stand here and if you were to look up, you would see that there's a wee tattoo shop up there. And it doesn't look like a very big place. But there are people, you know, who fly in from America, from Australia, from all over the world to go to that particular shop. It's just one of those little Belfast stories that we don't really hear so much about. People literally come from all over the world to sit there for Chris in the shop to tattoo them. It's amazing. And yeah, fair play.
Sadly, I'm not going to be queuing up, given that I'm a needle phobic. The day that anyone finds that I've been tattooed, I've clearly been kidnapped, knocked out, and tattooed against my will.
That's typically how it happens. So there we go. We've crossed now right into the heart of Shaftesbury Square. Yeah. The big lights there to our left, advertising all sorts of stuff. When I was young,
I thought, it's almost like Times Square.
Yeah. Times Square. Oh my goodness.
The sad thing is, again, as you were saying about Bradbury Place, the decay here.
We look around. If we pause, we're here just underneath and just looking up at the lights there, the big screen in Shaftesbury Square. We can look across, we see the Northern Ireland Supporters Club. They're closed, I imagine, due to the restrictions. But how many restaurants have come and gone here just over this last decade? Boarded up, and even the buildings around us here we see boarded up and tattered. It really is there's Belfast will always bounce back, boys. If there's one thing we know about Belfast, it bounces back. But there's a bounce to happen here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It does need life breathing.
Oh, absolutely.
But I talked earlier about public art. And one of the earliest pieces of public art that I ever remember are those figures on the what used to be the bank building in Shaftesbury Square.
So the place if you were looking at the big lights, the big screen in Shaftesbury Square, the way the screen is pointing is looking directly at
those two figures.
Wow, look at that,
figures, and they're apparently by the sculptor Elizabeth Frisk, and it doesn't actually have a name. They've just been known for years as the Flying Figures. But I came across when I was looking at a piece by the poet, Belfast poet Kieran Carson. This isn't a poem; it's a piece of prosody he wrote about the figures, and I just want to read this. He says, A work of art is a zone in which the viewer, reader or listener can enter as a participant and an interpreter. Sometimes he or she will invest it with meanings that might surprise its creator. A case in point is Elizabeth Frink's sculpture on the wall of the Ulster Bank at the intersection of the Dublin Road and Shaftesbury Square in Belfast. Commissioned by the bank in 1961, it was erected in 1964. It shows two giant cast aluminium figures seemingly caught in flight, one on a horizontal plane, the other poised below it on a diagonal, as if bound on a collision course or to embrace the other. The figures look alien, humanoid or angelic. Deliberately left untitled by Frink, a thing to be invested with whatever meaning a viewer cares to invest it with, the piece was soon dubbed Draft and Overdraft by local wags. Many of the citizens of Belfast were not so amused. Now remember the controversy attached to it at the time. Some thought it an affront to the divine proportions of the human body. Others thought it meaningless. However, over time it came to be accepted and is now an essential piece of the urban fabric, so much so perhaps that it is invisible to some. For me, it's among the finest public sculptures in the city, and there are precious few of those. It's redolent with ambiguity. I've no idea what Elizabeth Frink's intentions were when she made the piece or what she meant by it. It seems unlikely that its two figures were intended by her to represent our divided community. On the other hand, the fractures in the state of Northern Ireland were readily apparent even then to an outsider like Frink. And over the years, I've come to see that possibility in it. Two figures held in a static trajectory, attempting to meet the other, perhaps, or bound never to meet.
For me, I find myself as one of those people for whom this sculpture had become invisible.
Right.
It's so I've seen it so many times in my life, and it was lovely just as preparing for our walk today, just to remember it again. And while I love the laugh at the draft and overdraft, I love the idea that it is somehow difference in our community coming together, because there's a real movement. For me, it's a dynamic piece. There's a movement in it, and if you follow the lines that they're moving, they are of course going to collide. They're going to come together. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, listen, let's walk. So we're moving from the hallowed ground of the Shaftesbury Square onto the Dublin Road. Let's walk cityward down the Dublin Road, just passing by now that piece of sculpture we talked about, heading on down.
Yeah. And you talked about the university bookshop earlier on. Years ago, the one of my favourite second-hand bookshops was here on the left-hand side. It's now a vape cafe, but I mean there were some absolutely fabulous second-hand books. And one of our family stories is that my uncle, who was an even bigger book freak than I am, he managed to find in there a single volume that for such a price that he then gave it to his daughter as a wedding present. And she was unimpressed until she then got it valued and was able to buy an entire bedroom bedroom furniture for the cost of this one book. He knew what he was at. He knew what he was at. The
Dublin Road is one of those other roads in this part of the city. It's really vibrant. It seems to have, now for our wonder today, it seems to have held its vibrancy more than some of the other places we've been.
Yeah,
we've got shops, there are a lot of restaurants, albeit closed with the pandemic, but still seemingly open for business when that time comes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we are moving down into what is now known as the Linen Quarter, has been redefined as that, and we'll talk a wee bit more about that in here. But it's been transformed recently by the introduction during the pandemic of the cordoned off cycleways, and that's part of an increasing intention around Belfast to make it more pedestrian and cycle friendly. Of course, that doesn't necessarily meet with the pleasure of those who have to use cars, but it will hopefully in the long run transform our city. We're passing the Salvation Army on the right-hand side, and of course, I mean, we do give thanks for the work that they have done over the years with the least and the lowest in this city of ours, and indeed across the world. The work that they've done. On the right-hand side here, what was until very recently movie house.
That's right.
But again, I mean, things are changing. It's now there's a massive investment going into it to redevelop it as the office headquarters for a local business. So. I mean, I've seen many a movie in here over the years.
Of course, yes. And when you take a step back and you look intentionally at it, it's a huge building. Huge building altogether.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's...
And I mean, in its heyday, it brought great life to this part of the city, families and people going in and out. And in terms of my own life story, this is where I went on my first date with my soon-to-be wife. Our first date, Nuala and I went in to see that romantic film, Pulp Fiction. What a charmer I am.
And she's stuck with you.
Unbelievably so. But even, I mean, as we come to the former cinema, here's another little pocket park type space. There's certainly a green space there. And again, when we look down there seems to be some sort of a business. That was the Chicago Pizza Pie Factory, I think, back in the day, restaurant bar. And we have this lovely little green space. It seems to me to be a kind of overlooked type of green space.
Now, I do know that there are plans to redevelop this in the very near future. There are plans for revised lighting for it. This has become one of the hangouts, sadly, in recent years for those who are rough sleepers and in the town. But there are redevelopment plans for this small park.
As we pass it, then we're crossing Bankmore Street on our right, looking down. Then again back over to the bottom of the Ormeau Road there, and walking on down. We're in Bedford Street now. We've come off the Dublin Road. We're now at the beginning of Bedford Street. Yeah,
and we have just crossed the Blackstaff River.
We're reasonably dry. We did well. Yeah, the Blackstaff River flowing underneath us. Belfast City just being a city reclaimed from rivers all around us, isn't that right?
Yeah, a city built on mud, as Paul Muldoon wrote. But as we come to the junction with Ormeau Avenue, we come to a red sandstone edifice that my earliest memories of walking along Bedford Street and up onto Dublin Road was as a string boy for the Orange parades on the 12th as part of LOL 1003, and we came over from East Belfast and wound our way round to here, but you never saw this red sandstone edifice because it was always covered in scaffolding, because this is where the BBC put their cameras. And it's only in recent years that I've realised that it was a fountain, and it's currently being refurbished by the Linen Quarter. It's the Thomas Thompson fountain, erected in 1885 in memory of Dr. Thomas Thompson by his daughter Eliza. And Dr. Thompson was a physician who was one of the pioneers here in Belfast in the fight against cholera. So they honour it by a fresh water supply.
stands outside the BBC, just here in the middle of the road outside Broadcasting House. And you know, until we've drawn our attention to it today, I have never taken it under my notice. It's like that look up. I'm going to have to remember to look around me more as I walk around the city, and it's lovely just to hear and honour that man's name for the work that he did.
Yeah.
David, why don't we cross right over to it? I'm a kind of touchy-feely person. I'd like to feel the sandstone, and just to pick up on your experience of your first time coming around here. I don't even know what a string boy is, so I can imagine it. I'm going to guess. Tell me if I'm right or wrong, okay? So is a string boy a wee boy that holds a string on one of the big banners in the parade?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah,
I guessed that well. And here's another. This is a thing. So I'm 50, right? And I've never ever been to a 12th of July parade.
Right. Okay.
Never been to a 12th of July parade in my life.
Right.
Isn't that amazing? I have got caught up by accident when I'm travelling across the city. But isn't it a strange thing that might be the case?
Yeah. I mean, the thing was with me as a kid, there were two big days for me in the year. There was Christmas and there was the 12th. And the ironic thing is that the 12th was 2 days after my birthday. The 12th was a bigger thing for me than my birthday. But here we are under the
And you know, here at the fountain on this side of the fountain, it says, "Drinketh of whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again." Shall thirst again? Let us investigate this. We haven't started at the... Now. Where are you going to begin? This is great. So you have to, folks, when you're doing this, you have to find the start.
Whosoever drinketh of the water
will never thirst.
That I shall it's worn off. Serve him shall never thirst.
There we go. So that's what you, folks. If you want to do that, you can walk round and round, trying to find where you start. Actually, at the side where I am, there's a lovely little sticker on the wall that somebody's put that says "Kindness Matters." Isn't that nice? Nice? So here we are, standing at a fountain that I didn't know existed, and reflecting maybe on the importance of water. I'd like to read you a poem about water from the Irish poet Dennis O'Driscoll. And just listen how in a short space of time he takes something as commonplace as water and brings us into the mystery and the mysticism of it. This is simply called Water by Dennis O'Driscoll. The miracle of water is that it tastes of nothing, neither of chlorine nor peat, not of old tap fittings or dead sheep. Water was the first mirror, drinking images of beauty, showing their wrinkled future in the mildest breeze. Water clings to its neutrality, changes state at boiling point, finds the level at which tensions cool, limbs relax. It is the splinter of ice in the heart, the white blood of the snowman, the burst main flooding from Christ's frozen side. Wow. Thank you, Dennis O'Driscoll, for that beautiful poem. So, friends, a good time to have a look, orientate ourselves, because we're at a junction of a few different roads. So if you orientate yourself to where you have the BBC on your right hand side, Broadcasting House, it's on your right, and we're looking
down Bedford Street towards Donegal Square, and we're going to cross over towards the BBC and go down Bedford Street
towards the City Hall in that direction. And we've been very blessed with the weather today in our wonder. It's cold right enough, but it's still bright. We're still doing well. What's the weather like when you're wondering, listening to this? We wonder. You could let us know.
In Belfast, the weather can change in 15 minutes. They could have been through 4 different seasons in the course of our blethering.
Absolutely. And again, the story of the wander today is just seeing how Belfast is still changing. This street, the view that we have of this street now is so different than it would have been 5 years, which would have been different 10 years and 15 years. Do you remember the bowling alley would have been on the left here as you walk up Bedford Street? There's a nice Invest Northern Ireland, huge big glassy building there. Down the street there was the bowling alley, long gone now. I spent many's a great afternoon in there bowling.
But if we look down to the right, down Clarence Street, down at the bottom of that, there's St Malachy's, and that's a place that speaks right into the history of Belfast and the dynamic relationships that there have been in Belfast between the religious communities here over the years.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Let me read you a little bit of the history of it, David, and then let's have a wee chat about it. But so we're at the corner of Clarence Street. We've come up Bedford Street. You'll see Clarence Street with Dean's Deli there on the corner, and we're looking down to the right, and you'll see quite a distinctive looking church there, a couple of towers there, and a big green door. So let me read from their website what I found out. On the 3rd of November 1841, which is the feast of St Malachy, the foundation stone for St Malachy's church was laid. And then on the 15th of December 1844, Dr. William Crawley, Archbishop of Armagh and Primate of all Ireland, dedicated the building. The church was designed by Thomas Jackson of Waterford, and it is in the ecclesiastical style of the Tudor period. It is cruciform in shape. It's 113 feet wide, 52 feet, 113 feet wide one way, 52 feet wide the other way, and 40 feet high. The original high altar, pulpit and rails were all of Irish oak. However, they were replaced when it was renovated in 1926. Oh my goodness! I would have loved to have seen that. All that remains of the original ornaments is the canopy over the pulpit, which has been painted white to match the marble of the present altar furnishings. The sanctuary floor is a mosaic, the principal colour being blue. At the foot of the altar is a pelican, a common Christian symbol of sacrifice. Now, St Malachy's is a lovely little piece of history, and when you get a chance, go in and check this out. St Malachy's is perhaps best known for its fan-vaulted ceiling, which is an imitation of the Henry VII Chapel in Westminster Abbey. Sir Charles Brett said of it, "It is though a wedding cake has been turned inside out, so creamy, lacy and frothy is the plasterwork." Isn't that just a beautiful description of what is genuinely a beautiful church, full of artwork, full of that history of the different churches here in Belfast City helping each other out financially so that buildings could be completed. And indeed what I associate St Malachy's with a lot now myself, and I've worked with St Malachy's parish in my own job, but they have such a dedicated outreach to the poor and on how they support food banks and do all sorts of wonderful work there. With Father Michael, their parish priest, the pastoral council, and the parishioners. And St Malachy's is one of those parishes where very few of the people who worship there live within the parish boundary, just given that it is a city centre church. But so many people will travel from all over Belfast to go there on a Saturday evening or a Sunday morning in times when we're open. Because they associate themselves with this community so much. So folks, if you get a chance, it's well worth a visit. It's in Alfred Street in Belfast.
No, I mean it really is part and parcel of the history of this city, and really marking the beginnings of the southward spread of the city from the beginning of the 19th century out this way. But
so we'll keep going up. We're straight up Bedford Street again, keeping the Invest Northern Ireland building on our left as we go up, and all the building here. Look at this.
I mean, there's a huge amount of building going on here, but you call it the Invest Northern Ireland building, but of course anyone who watches In Line of Duty knows that's the headquarters.
Is that right?
That's the headquarters of AC12 in there. But in front of that Invest Northern Ireland building, the Linen Quarter, which has responsibility for the redevelopment of this whole area, has really is a bit of a marker of the history and a mark to what they're wanting to do in the future. Have established this little flax field with some flax plants and other plants planted here, marking out the origins of the wealth of this city, and particularly this part of the city, because this place was peppered with linen warehouses. The mills may have been elsewhere, but this is where the warehouses were.
And then the linen quarter people are doing fantastic work in the city at the minute, aren't they? They really are.
Well, I mean, you say I'm on the board, so I couldn't possibly come.
You're fantastic, David, aren't you? That's what I.
So,
but really, the work that the linen quarter, what is the linen quarter?
Bid.
The
Business Improvement District.
That work, just holding this part of Belfast in esteem and wanting to regenerate it, is really important.
Yeah. But I want to, as we look at this, the flax field, I just want to read another poem. And this is by one of our greatest living poets here, Michael Longley, and it's the linen industry. Pulling up flax after the blue flowers have fallen, and laying our handfuls in the peaty water to rot those grasses to the bone, or building stooks that recall the skirts of an invisible dancer. We become a part of the linen industry and follow its processes to the grubby town where the fields are compacted into window boxes and there's little room among the big machines. But even in our attic under the skylight, we make love on a bleach green, the whole meadow draped with material turning white in the sun, as though snow reluctant to melt were our attire. What's passion but a battering of stubborn stalks, when a gentle combing out of fibres like hair, and a weaving of these into christening robes, into garments for a marriage or funeral? Since it's like a bereavement, once the labour's done, to find ourselves last workers in a dying trade. Let flax be our matchmaker, our undertaker, the provider of sheets for whatever the bed. And be shy of your breath in the presence of death. Say that you look more beautiful in linen, wearing white petticoats, the bow on your bodice, a butterfly, attending the embroidered flowers.
Beautiful. Michael Longley, his poems are so evocative. You are just there, aren't you? What a blessing he is.
He paints pictures with words.
Let's go. So we're moving from the flax field on our left, heading up again to another stop-off point. One of the most exciting stop-off points for me on the wander.
The canopy of the Ulster Hall.
And indeed, before we even get here, do you remember what would have been here? The group theatre. The group theatre. Long gone. My goodness, what a history. We could do a whole podcast on that.
Absolutely.
And then the Ulster Hall. Eh?
Yeah, no, I mean, the grand dame of Bedford Street.
Yeah. Let's stop underneath this lovely ironwork canopy outside the Ulster Hall.
Yeah, no, it's been here since 1862, and it's really has been the centre of cultural and political life from that date to this. Ulster resistance to Home Rule began here in 1886. Winston Churchill was supposed to speak here in 1912, but was barred from entry because he supported Irish Home Rule, and it's been the site of a number of more modern political rallies too. Culturally, it hosted Dickens on his speaking tours in its earliest days, and earlier I referred briefly to to science and the birth in the city of Lord Kelvin. But in 1874, the Ulster Hall hosted a controversial speech, which, according to the historian of science, Frank Turner, sparked perhaps the most intense debate of Victorian conflict of science and religion. The physicist John Tyndall, in what became known as the Belfast Address, claimed that matter could create life on its own, and that cosmology, the study of the universe, was the domain of science, not religion. And needless to say, this didn't necessarily go down very well in God-fearing Ulster in 19th century. And doubtless there are many prominent people who would respond in similar fashion today. But of course, it's most famous as a music venue, being the long-term home of the Ulster Orchestra. But I must confess that my musical taste is much more lowbrow. I've been to some amazing gigs here over the years. I'm sure you have, Jim.
Totally. Absolutely. This is the Ulster Hall as a music venue is just, it's hot, sweaty, and small enough to be intense. It's just a great venue altogether.
Led Zeppelin. Performed the first rendition ever of Stairway to Heaven.
They did.
5th of March 1971 again. Another momentous year, Jim. A momentous year. But many other acts stopped coming here during the Troubles, of course. Although Rory Gallagher, he kept playing.
Oh, my goodness,
but again, that was before my time. But one of my first gigs here was watching Stiff Little Fingers, and their anthem, Alternative Ulster, is perhaps an appropriate piece to quote here.
You want to sing it for us, David?
I doubt it.
I don't know. I brought my guitar. We could do a bit of busking.
I mean, it was written in 1979. I mean, the height when
punk movement.
I mean, to summarise the song, it's a protest. It's a protest that the people of our generation weren't experiencing what people in the rest of the UK were, the freedom to enjoy the music that they wanted to hear. I mean, actually, a couple of years before, there'd been a riot outside here known as the Battle of Bedford Street, when a Clash concert had been cancelled. But the song went beyond musical choice. It was about the whole issue of having a freedom of lifestyle choice that was available elsewhere and not available to people here, where you were forced to choose between being an Irish nationalist or Ulster Unionist. And this song has absolutely nothing to do with supporting any particular political vision of this place. It was about seeing beyond the divisions, and indeed some of the concerts here were some of the most integrated events in Northern Ireland at the time.
I even met people from Lurgan.
That really is an alternative Ulster. So, Alternative Ulster by Stiff Little Fingers. This really is a four corners first. There's nothing for us in Belfast. The pound's old, and that's a pity. Okay, so there's the Trident and Bangor, and then you walk back to the city. We ain't got nothing, but they don't really care. They don't even know, They just want money. We can take it or leave it. What we need is an alternative Ulster. Grab it and change it, it's yours. Get an alternative Ulster. Ignore the Boers and their laws. Get an alternative Ulster. Be an anti-security force. Alter your native Ulster. Alter your native land. Take a look at where you're living. You've got the army on the street, and the RUC dog of repression is barking at your feet. Is this the kind of place you want to live? Is this where you want to be? Is this the only life we're going to have? What we need is an alternative Ulster. Grab it and change it, it's yours. Get an alternative Ulster. Ignore the Boers and their laws. Get an alternative Ulster. Be an anti-security force. Alter your native Ulster. Alter your native land. And they say they're a part of you, and that's not true, They say they've got control of you, and that's a lie, They say you will never be free. 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 Alternative Ulster. Alternative Ulster. Alternative Ulster. Alternative Ulster.
Dun, 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 dun. Do you know, That was literally the first riff you had to learn on guitar.
Oh,
you know,
right,
when I was growing
okay.
up, that was it. You had. Can you play a stiff shit? Brilliant, fantastic. Yeah, what a place. God, you know, I was probably a little later concert goer than that. I didn't see the Stiffs, didn't see Rory. Although I think if I had to go back, that'd be the gig I'd want to go and see. I was here in the mid to late 80s, and the whole goth scene here, kind of, and the goth scene had what the punk scene had too. It didn't matter where you were from, whether you were Catholic, Protestant, whatever, or where you are from Lurgan or Belfast, as long as you had the look and you were into the music, and that's what I got here.
True of the heavy metal scene as well. I mean, I went to a Whitesnake gig here
Rock.
On the eve of my A levels.
Rock.
Couldn't hear for 5 days after.
Absolutely. Yeah. My goodness. So listen, we could stand talking about this all the day. So we're keeping it on our right hand side, Ulster Hall on the right, walking up towards the City Hall direction, past the Ulster Hall, and look at what we see on our right there.
On our left.
Our left,
left from your
God,
right
jeepers.
either. So
Don't talk.
On our left hand side is the new Grand Central Hotel. But you know, again, for people of our vintage, it was Windsor House.
Absolutely.
I mean, formerly the tallest building in Northern Ireland, in Ireland indeed, for a long period of time, and housed many an organisation within it. The court service, the victims commission. There were bits of the BBC were based here. Indeed, Paul Muldoon, the Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, he worked in that building when he worked for the BBC.
Wow.
And indeed, on the left hand side of the building at the front, there's a piece of poetry that's cut into steel at the corner of Franklin Street here.
On the outside?
Yeah. Well, shall we walk across to it?
So we're looking now towards the Grand Central Hotel. We're on the other side of the street. We're going to cross to it, and we're going to go down the left-hand side of the building. So follow us, friends. There we go. We got across the road safely. Thank goodness.
And just at the very front.
Oh yes,
right
look at this.
Here.
Wow.
Is a piece of his poem, the Belfast Hymn. A story of hope and home that he does. And if you're interested in that poem, it's available on the hotel website. It's not possible to do justice to the whole poem here. Would have to add an extra half hour onto the whole podcast, and it's going to be long enough. But I would want to quote those last couple of stanzas that are cut into steel here on the Franklin Street side of the building. It's part of Hymn by Paul Muldoon, and it's the closing stanzas. The spirit of those men of steel, their grey-eyed wives and daughters, will keep us on an even keel through the uncharted waters. For we steer by the northern star, however far we roam. That river mouth near a sandbar will signal we've come home. And of course, that river mouth near a sandbar is Belfast, Belfast, the house, and those men of steel are the shipyard workers. But my dad, as I said earlier, my dad was a man of steel. But he didn't work in the shipyard. He was a structural steel worker. And going around the city with him, he was forever pointing out buildings where he had essentially, as I said earlier, created the skeleton for them. And I now bore my children by saying, your granda did this, did that, did the other. And when they eventually decided to put a radio antenna gantry on the top of this building, of the old Windsor House, it was him who cut and welded that gantry, and had to come down and in the middle of the street here recut and re-weld it because the structural engineers got their measurements all wrong. When I was invited to an event here in the penthouse bar of this fabulous recreation of this building shortly after it opened. One of the first things I did was go out on and check that the gantry was still there, and it is. My own office is just across at the back of it, and I would have seen some of the work going on here, and I wrote this in the wake of it. It's called the Grand Central Mark II. A many-storied sentinel stripped back to its skeleton, its tired tiers of concrete flayed away, yet still wearing your galvanized crown, wreath-clothed in stylish black, in mourning for the grieving victims who walk still within your shadow and were once discussed within your walls. Looking down on your little sister, record-breaking for all the wrong reasons, while your older namesake is forgotten, a casualty of conflict and commerce. Can either you or your creator see any further forward for all your height? Or are you a Babylesque folly, a monolithic marble grave marker? You are a striking memorial to good and bad, public and personal. So I take your exclusive elevator and drink an expensive rooftop toast. Because, of course, I mean, the original Grand Central wasn't here. It was in in Royal Avenue, and we're heading that direction.
The hotel on our left and move up as if we were going towards City Hall direction.
Yeah. And we're coming close to the end of our journey, and actually coming close to what was the boundary of the city at the beginning of the 19th century. At the beginning of the 19th century, the city essentially stopped here at Donegal Square. So this whole stretch that we have walked through today wasn't part of that original city.
At that stage, what would that have been? Land,
it was
river,
all meadows,
marsh?
Meadows, marsh. There was a huge hunting estate out to the
of course,
right.
Yeah.
This part was the sign of a new episode, a new phase for the city, and you know. Let's hope and pray that we're moving into a new phase in this city off the back of this as we come to the very end of Bedford Street. And on our right is the former Scottish Mutual building, what was supposed to be the George Best Hotel, but that development has come to a halt. But we're now at the boundary of Bedford Street and Hard Street, and in lockdown the city centre has been unusually quiet, and whereas in the first lockdown the problem of homelessness was cured overnight, the rough sleepers in the city have at times been the only sign of human presence in that city, and yeah, it's yeah.
So let's gather ourselves then. We're just on the corner of Bedford Street and Howard Street. So on your right will be the George Best, or what would have been the George Best Hotel. And you'd have the City Hall in front of you, and you'll see where the roads intersect, Bedford Street and Howard Street. And I'd like to share a poem with you. Even on our wander today, we met one of our homeless brothers. Had a chat with him. Just understood a little bit from his face and his words the difficulties that he faces. So I want to share this poem with you that I wrote called Homeless in Howard Street. I have bad days, he looks at me and says quietly, clutching himself under a frayed army issue jacket. His cardboard sign lies on the footpath, homeless and hungry, please help. accidental alliteration announcing the adversity this man faces in a city with too much. We throw away more than we need. Too much, but not for all. I have bad days. He manages a smile now as he pets his dog, Skinny, loving him back. But I believe God has a plan for better things to come. He looks at me longingly for some reflected confirmation that God exists and his plan is not for all bad days. I believe it is so, I nod. We sit in silence now, connected, both petting a dog, both sitting on a footpath in the city of excess, both begging God for an end to bad days.
And that brings us to the end of our walk. And I'm sure we're all begging for an end to bad days. Thanks to you, Jim, for your company on this wander. Thank you to all of you who are sharing in this online. We look forward to future wonderful wanders in other corners of our city.